Hey there, YouTube. Wow, what an amazing response. I was not expecting that many views, hits, comments, or anything. Last time I shared a video, I got about 100 views. So thank you for all the feedback, critical feedback. What's going on with the aircraft? What happened? A lot of people saying lifters wouldn't cause that problem. Yes, I know lifters wouldn't cause the actual problem. So let me go into a little bit of a timeline to explain some of the maintenance and engine issues that I was having. And how I came about this aircraft and that sort of thing. I purchased this aircraft in August of 2020. I took a CFI buddy and we flew out to Colorado, picked it up and flew it back here to California. Before I went and picked it up, I flew to Colorado and I had a pre-flight done. The airplane was based in Colorado Springs. I had PDF scans of all of the logs, and I found a mechanic in Denver who had nothing in the logbooks and who had a lot of Cessna retract experience. So I took it to that person and had them do a pre-flight inspection. Found a couple of minor squawks, but nothing too big, and maybe $1,000 worth of damage. Or not damage, but $1,000 worth of squawks. So I went ahead and purchased the airplane. I started the paperwork, said, yep, I want it. From there, I took my buddy and we flew out there, and he gave me the 5 hours required for Cessna 210 high performance training per my insurance requirements. Prior to that, I've only had probably about 20 hours in a turbo 182, and everything else has been low performance, if you will. So we get the airplane back, and I don't have a mechanic. This is my first airplane. So I take my same buddy, I've known him for 10 years, and ask him, hey, who do you recommend? And he told me he recommends this guy. And I had I went for a flight one time, and I took off and I started climbing out and noticed that I was only making naturally aspiration type turbo pressures. So as I climbed, the manifold pressure dropped, and that was unusual for that aircraft. So I landed back at the field where that mechanic was and just said, here, go deal with this for me. I have another flight where I adjusted the K factor on the MVP 50, and I realized that in flight. And the K factor is how many pulses of fuel equal gallons per hour. And so that I made a video of that, and I tried to make that a little bit of a clickbaity type of video, so I apologize for that. And then I put 100 hours on this airplane between August and February. So I was flying 30 hours a month, and I did 2 oil changes in that time frame. It was due for another oil change. I had 40 hours on it, so I scheduled to do my annual early since I put 100 hours on it and it was due for an oil change. Go ahead and do the annual. So I took it to the same mechanic, and when they went to go change the oil, they found a lot of carbon and metal in the oil. So this goes all the way back to February when this is happening. What they found is they shoved a borescope down the top and found that the lifters had spalling. They recommended that I replace the lifters and it would be okay to keep the cam. Now, keep in mind, I am not a mechanic. I'm just a low-time pilot, first-time owner. So we replaced the lifters. They complete the annual. There were some issues with the landing gear. I don't really want to get into that at that annual. And then I got my plane back from that annual inspection on May 5th. 2021. So this is February. I drop it off. May 5th, I get the plane back from Annual. So we get new lifters in it, and I go fly it. And I fly it for about 22 hours in 1 month's time. And then I go to change the oil again. So I change the oil, I take a sample, send it off to AOA, and I take the filter over to this mechanic that did the lifter change, and I have him cut it open and inspect it. He cuts it open, he washes it out, he does all of the stuff, and the next day he brings me a bag of metal saying, hey, we found this in your oil filter. He told me to keep flying. I think this is just residual from the previous metal that was already in there, and we're just washing it out. I'm not a mechanic. He's a mechanic, a repair station, an IA, so I trust him. So I fly another 20 hours, 19.6 hours from May 5th to July 6th. And I do another oil change. This time, after I do the oil change, I notice that my oil pressure is low. Not too low. It's making 30 psi. So I notice my oil pressure is low. It's at the bottom of the green after this oil change. So I go take the bore scope and shove it down the hole again, and I notice the same kind of damage or similar kind of damage, and I'm not making oil pressure at idle. There is oil pressure, but it's not making, it's not in the green. So I ground the bird right there. I know I don't fly it anymore. I go to the guy and I talk to him. He said, well, we were trying to save you money. There's no warranty on that work. What do you want to do? Well, I'm not flying the plane without oil pressure because I don't want to end up with a blown engine over something. So I said, well, I can't fly it. He's like, well, you can have somebody pull it and we can work on it again. And I just walked away. I wasn't going to deal with that guy anymore. So that's the first mechanic. I'm not dealing with that guy. I'm on the field, and I have the on-field mechanic who I've been friends with for 5 years since I started flying. So I have him pull the engine, and I call around. I call the people who put the engine together. I called Western Skyways. They gave me a decent quote for an IRAN repair. That's a inspect and repair as necessary. That was their recommendation. The Western Skyways recommended an IRAN. I called Continental, gave them the information, gave them pictures of what I saw. They recommended an IRAN inspection or an IRAN repair. Gave me some quotes, gave me some timelines. The money wasn't the issue. The timeline and timing was the issue. So I call around a couple of buddies on the field, ask them what they recommend, who they use. Guy on the field used Lycon to have his engine overhauled. So I called them up. They were a year and a half out, waiting list, or maybe 9 months waiting list. So another buddy who flies a 210 and a 421C recommended a guy. So we took the engine to that guy. He's an engine guy, and he performed an IRAN. So we pulled the engine out of my airplane. We split the case. We replaced the lifters. We replaced the cam. We replaced the main bearings. We replaced the bearings. We replaced the connecting rod bolts and nuts. We replaced all of the gaskets. We replaced the oil pump housing. Since the engine was apart and the pistons came out of the cylinders, we put new rings on it and we honed the cylinders. I say we, this is all him. I didn't touch it any of that time. That went to him in July. I got it back late October, and then I had the my on-field AMP-IA reinstall the engine from this manufacturer, or from this engine guy. So on the engine side, it was an IRAN. It was a repair. It's only a repair, but the cylinders had been off, so they had cylinder work. So that's why I was following the break-in procedures. Because of this, I was nervous. The engine had been pulled out of the airplane. The engine had been pulled apart and put back together and put back in the airframe. So I'm super nervous about this flight, because I know this is not a standard flight. This is not me going and flying around. This is me dealing with a post-maintenance issue. One of the on-field mechanics said, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen in the first 10 minutes. Well, it happened in the first minute and a half. But I was spring-loaded, as Josh would say, spring-loaded for an abort. I was ready for it to let go, because that's when it would let go. It would let go either rolling down the runway, or as soon as I got in the air, or somewhere around in the pattern. That's why I did the STOL takeoff, full power, 20 degrees of flaps, climb hard. I was climbing like a rocket ship. I got past Delta taxiway and I pulled the gear up. I was halfway down the runway and well above it. There's no way I'm getting back to the runway. That's why I pulled the gear up so fast. So let's talk about the flight a little bit. I've done a lot of analysis on the flight. I've looked at this video frame by frame to see when things happened. And you know, there's an interesting thing, an interesting feature. I analyze all of my flights. I record all of the flights in ForeFlight, and then I export that and look at the video, or look at the track logs in CloudAhoy. You know, how was my approach? How was my patterns? That sort of thing. You know, I got this idea from Steve from Flight Shops. Thanks, Steve. The information that it provides me and the post-flight analysis is amazing. It's a great idea. I highly recommend it. Not sponsored. So I always record the flights, and I always put it into ForeFlight. I always have ForeFlight record, which is why I wanted to record that. There's a cool feature with GoPros. They have a GPS. With ForeFlight, you can take a YouTube video and synchronize it to the track log. And we'll go analyze that in just a moment. But when the engine let go, I was directly over the concrete plant at the end of the street. The turn back and flight back to the airport was 0.76 miles, according to Google Maps. 0.76 miles. And everybody's asking, why didn't you put it down in the green field straight ahead? Well, if I went for that green field straight ahead, 0.76 miles straight ahead would have put me one block into the new housing development on the other side. I was directly over the top of this building right here when the engine quit. This field is not very long. And if I was coming down and I started at that end, yeah, I could get stopped. Or even if I got into the middle of it, I could get stopped. But from 400 feet, at best glide ratio, even at the glide ratio that I was at, I would be about where I am now before I even touched down. And that means I would be running into these houses. There's no way I could make the field with how high I was. So a lot of people have been asking, why'd you put the gear down so early? Why'd you put the gear down so early? I would have waited till the runway was made. If you look in the video, when that engine let go, I yanked that yoke to the left. You can see it. I just pull. Well, that yanking it to the left to make that turn also pitched the nose up a little bit. I notice this up pitch immediately, and I push it forward. I make almost a 90-degree turn. I look over my left shoulder where the airport is, right where I expect it to be, but there it is. Then you see me reach for the gear. So I see the airport and I see the gear, or I go for the gear. I'm going down, and I'm going down right now. I want the gear out. As soon as I put the gear handle lever down, I noticed that the airplane slowed way down, and that's when I noticed that I was approaching stall speed, and I pushed the nose forward even harder. In doing that, I started to wonder, do I have enough energy to actually make the field now? And as I'm coming around, I see this big green nice field straight out in front of me, right on the west side of the water canal. There's this green field right there. And I thought, do I just aim for that, or do I have enough energy to get inside the fence? About a second later, I just realized I have the energy. I'm going to make it. I'm not going to straighten out. I'm going to keep coming around and head for the field. I'm in one piece. The aircraft's in one piece, except for the engine, of course. And that's in many pieces, all inside of itself. So one question you guys have asked me, what happened with the engine? What happened with the engine? What's going on? I don't know. The thing about it is, this all happened on Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving. Today is Saturday after Thanksgiving. Yesterday was Black Friday, today's Saturday, and I'm recording this. I've done a lot of analysis on the data, on the flight path, everything that's happened. So back to the engine problem. I don't know what happened yet. Today's Saturday. The engine blew up just 3 days ago. The next day was Thanksgiving. The following day was Black Friday. So nobody's even taken a look to see what's happened with the engine or the aircraft or anything. I will keep you posted as we take it apart, tear it down. I did not do this work. I'm not going to publicly tell you who did the actual work on the airplane. Not the first time when just the lifters were changed, and not this time when the inspect and repair as necessary was performed. All right, so it is Saturday, and right after Thanksgiving. This event happened 2 days ago. Let's take a look in here. This is a hole right here. That is a crankcase right there, or the crankshaft right there. Let's take a look at this from the other side. This right here is the connecting rod sticking out of the aircraft, or out of the engine. So at 400 feet, this may look like a field that you can land in, but clearly this is an orchard full of trees.